I'm giving Pokemon Legends ZA a 6 out of 10. There's a lot of good things to say about this game, but a lot of things that need a lot of work. As an artist in game dev, it pains me to see the original Pokemon art style from the early games and the manga, and then see a style that looks like this. Even Pokemon Legends Arceus had some sort of style. They were sort of riffing off of Breath of the Wild with their cel-shaded graphics. And I know everyone has talked about the flat windows in the city, but my biggest critique is just the fact that this game doesn't actually have a style. It's sort of like they tried to go semi-realistic, but they didn't go realistic enough and they didn't go stylized enough. And the way they could have easily fixed that would be with more hand-painted textures. Games like League of Legends have a really powerful oomph to them because of how beautiful the artistry is in the textures themselves. In this game, it felt like they tried to go for a quasi-realism, and that didn't really work out because the fidelity of the textures was so low res, and the characters themselves were very simple, like non-textured models. And that's cool, but the rest of the world needs to reflect the style of the characters and the Pokemon so that there's cohesion in the overarching style of the world. It just gives this feeling of cheapness, and as a multi-billion-dollar company, there's just no excuse for not pushing the graphical style or iterating on a pre-existing style. When we have games like Persona 3 Reload running on a Switch 2, there's just no excuse for a game to look like this in 2025. I did really like the music in this game though. I found myself humming the tune of the main theme song when you're in the city, even when I wasn't playing the game. As far as a Pokemon story goes, I did really like this one. I like that they threw you right into a mystery and there was a lot to unravel as the story went on. It was also good to finally have some conflict in this game with the threat of the rogue Mega Evolution Pokemon, as well as some of the more mysterious characters like the CEO, L, and Corbeau. And I understand that it's a kid's game, right? But the game does need some sort of conflict to sort of drive the story, give you a reason to want to push forward and see what happens at the end. So I'm glad that they did incorporate some threats into this game. And without spoiling anything, I did really like the impact of the ending of the game. I like that they dropped a lot of lore tidbits along the way and sort of gave you enough breadcrumbs to really appreciate how everything wrapped up at the end. I do wish though that the whole game had that same level of gravitas. It really felt like there was emptiness in this world, and the beginning started off really, really strong, and the ending ended really strong, but in the middle, it just felt like there's a lack of drama, a lack of that emotional storytelling that we've seen like in the anime, for example. I don't really get why the anime has that level of storytelling, but then the games, which should be their, flagship part of their franchise, feels very weak in the storytelling department. It also feels like they're saving some story elements potentially for DLC, which is kind of cool, but especially with the DLC coming out so soon, it feels like another cheap shot. Like, okay, pay us another $30 in a month so that you can hear the rest of what's going on with everyone else. Okay, now we have to talk about the lack of voice acting in this game. It's ridiculous that we're getting these fully acted scenes and there's lip flaps, but the sound is completely silent. We need voice acting at this point in a Pokemon game. It just feels so awkward without the characters talking at least a little bit. I know in Breath of the Wild, they started to do some voice acting, and I felt like that was the appropriate amount. It wasn't like everything needed to be voice acted, but especially the more dramatic cutscenes, like the characters were actually talking because they were fully animated. I feel like there's almost this excuse like, oh, it's just tradition in Pokemon games. And that worked, especially back when they were 2D and very simplistic. But now that there's fully 3D rendered models, like we need to have the characters actually speak. It's gonna make the game feel a lot more polished, and it's going to allow us to connect a lot more with the characters as well. Now, the world in some ways felt very alive. As you're running around Lumiose City, there's people hanging out with their Pokemon, there's kids running around and stuff like that, which was really cool to see. Especially in the wild zones, it felt really alive. You're kind of just wandering around and you see the Pokemon just, appear, and, you can catch them and stuff like that. That felt really cool. But there's parts of this game that just felt like dead, especially in terms of the cinematics. Like, for example, how come in the tournament battle sequence that happens later on, you don't actually ever see any cutscenes of other trainers battling with their Pokemon? Just adding a cutscene or two of like, oh, these two guys are fighting each other could have added so much more to the immersion of the story. It just felt very much like, okay, we're just following the main character and the camera is only ever on the main character. That makes sense to a certain extent, but the main character's in the room with the other people battling. I want to see the other people battling as well. Even if it was a situation like there's these like tennis court kind of things in the world, if you run into one of these, maybe you're just seeing someone else having a battle. It feels like you're the only person in the entire game that ever battles. Another great place to do this would have been in the battle zones. I really liked that you got to explore those and sort of sneak up on trainers and, attack them with a move they were weak to. But it was kind of just like everyone was just wandering around in those zones. Maybe there could have just been, preset little fights happening as you're wandering around. It would have made the world feel a lot more alive. This game did a lot more telling than showing. And another example of this is the rogue mega evolved Pokemon are apparently in all this pain, and they're going to cause crazy destruction if you don't stop them before they evolve, sort of thing. But we never really get to see that happen. It's always like you just find one standing on a rooftop, just standing there with like pink stuff floating around them, and then you fight them. And the fights are really cool and a lot of fun, but I feel like they could have also showed maybe one of them did mega evolve before you got to them to kind of change up the story, and they started like wrecking buildings or something. Or you actually got to see the emotion on the Pokemon, like they're actually in anguish because this thing is happening to them. It just feels like a lot of the elements that they were trying to represent in the game were very stagnant, and we need to see this stuff happening. You can't just tell us that it's happening. Another thing that really bothered me about the gameplay was, why were there just random boulders in the city? Like, it made absolutely no sense. They didn't even try to explain it away. What they could have easily done in a situation like that is said, oh, there's some parts of the city that are more like dilapidated and they're already like crumbling walls. So you need to use a fighting move to break down the walls to open up some secret pathway. This is like game design 101. You just need to come up with a more creative solution to solve a problem you're having, which is, how do we create blockers in the city? And you need to use a move to get through. I also think it was a bold move to keep the entire game inside a city. And it was cool. I did like roaming the city. I liked climbing up on the ladders and walking around the rooftops and stuff like that. But again, there could have easily just been that little bit of extra love, where maybe there's a mission where you go to a town outside the city, a small town. Like, it didn't have to be a large area that they modeled, just something to get you away from what you've been seeing the whole time. On a technical standpoint, I do think that the new battle system was awesome. I really loved that it felt more action-oriented, and I like that they're kind of distinguishing the Legends series as the more action-based one, and then the main series as traditional turn-based. I do think, though, that they just need to push the envelope more with the action component. It still feels pretty stale to a certain extent, and I can't quite place my finger on what that is. I think it might have something to do with the animations just feel kind of stiff. I don't know what they're reusing. I know they're definitely reusing models and stuff like that, but they just need to put some more oomph into the action combat if they're going action combat. The other thing that drove me nuts is on the right side of the screen, there were those really big bars that would say like, Gengar did this attack or whatever, this Pokemon fainted. But it was so pushed in to the screen that it was covering my Pokemon like for half of the battles. I had to zoom the camera around to actually see where I was fighting. So these are just all like sort of easy polish touch-up things that should have gone through quality assurance to begin with and should have been fixed before the game was released. I think that these games have such a tight turnaround that they're like, okay, we got to put all of our eggs into creating this new battle system. We have to do all of these moves that work together, and we need online, and we need new graphical style, and they're just making new and new and new stuff instead of iterating on things that already exist and then refining them. The battle system was cool that they reinvented the wheel, but if they didn't have to waste time reinventing a bunch of other things, then I think maybe they could have put some more love into the battle system itself. In general, I can't say that I didn't have a really fun time playing Pokemon Legends ZA. I loved running around, going to the next story mission, smashing crystals, catching alpha Pokemon. I have like a giant Pikachu right now in my party, which is pretty cool. But it just felt like there were things that were lacking in this game, and it feels like if Pokemon really wants to have a polished product at the end of the day, they need to put some more resources into their games. And I think this could have been something where, honestly, if they just had more budget to allocate to the game, it would have felt a little bit tighter at the end of the day. The side quests, although sort of throwaway, felt like a cool addition to add depth to the game. Like in particular, there's this one series of quest lines where there's this director who's shooting a movie and he keeps asking you to bring him these like scary Pokemon. And every time you bring him one of these scary Pokemon, they end up being really friendly to everyone. So he has to like totally pivot the way his movie works. It was fun world building, and although like not totally necessary, it was a good way to encourage you to like run out, try to find that Pokemon, bring it back, and have a cool, mini little story. So those are the types of things as well that I think they're really fun, but they could be pushed further, obviously. Like, I'd rather have less quests with more impact instead of more quests that are just sort of, doing whatever sort of stuff. The ranked battle system and the challenger tickets was also a really good way to keep you on your toes. I liked that there was this day-night cycle, and the world sort of totally changes at night, where you go into these battle zones and you are, challenging these trainers at night, and you find the little gold coins and the tickets that help increase your points. It just felt like a game inside a game. And I know that, there wasn't a lot of logic, like real world logic behind how all of that worked. But in terms of fun factor, it was a fun video gamey sort of thing that they incorporated. This was also the first time in a while that Pokemon felt a bit more challenging. I feel like the past couple games I just blew through all of the trainers with like one high level starter Pokemon, and that was it. But in this game, there were a couple times where my trainer did faint, or I got blasted by a rogue, Mega Evolution Pokemon beam or something like that. So I really had to think, and I liked that you had to sort of strategize where your trainer character was in relation to your Pokemon, and that there was different things you could do to sort of defend yourself from the other Pokemon. It made moves from previous games that felt sort of like dinky, like actually have some impact. The Rogue Evolution boss battles were also really fun to me. I felt like I really did have to go into them strategizing who I was bringing in my party and how I was going to tackle, actually defeating them. I also think the Mega Evolutions looked really sick. I ended up having a Mega Charizard X in my party for like the second half of the game and never looked back. There are also good incentives to keep switching your party around in this game too. Like I said previously with the side quests, there were a lot of quests that encourage you to go catch a certain Pokemon or only battle with a certain Pokemon, so you'd have to kind of like go train them up. And then I also like that they locked the Mega Stones away throughout the story, so that later on, you unlock a new Mega Evolution Stone, you're like, I want to get that Pokemon, put them in my party, try it out, and see how the Mega Evolved form feels. In the end, I had a ton of fun with Pokemon Legends ZA, but if I'm giving this game a score, it needs to be based on what is current. So that means current graphical style, not so much the fidelity of the graphics. I think that a game can have a great graphical style and not look like God of War. It just needs to be designed with intention. And the gameplay itself, there's certain things that we've come to expect with a big franchise like this in terms of quality, polish, things like the voice acting, for example, that just need to be pushed a little bit more with more budget and possibly more time. I get that they're trying to run two franchises at the same time right now, and it's cool that they've differed, but I would almost rather have a longer leg on an existing game with more DLC or updates or whatever, so that they can put more time into the development of the game, so that the product that we're playing at the end of the day and spending, you know, $70 on is something that we feel is actually of quality and up to the standards that we expect. The Pokemon franchise in general just has so much to offer between all of the characters, the lore, the story, and the emotion that it can evoke, but it feels like every game has just been a small snippet of what we know the whole franchise has to offer. And I think if they just take a step back and they sort of reevaluate the way they are developing, we could get a lot more of an interesting final product. So at the end of the day, I feel like this game was really fun. I really liked it. It was great, but I do know what was missing with this, especially having played other, you know, AAA games or even AA games recently. Let me know what you think in the comments, like and subscribe for more reviews.